Thanks everyone for joining us today. We've got an awesome presenter with us, Brian Bushway. Uh, Brian, you want to introduce yourself to our crowd, and I'm assuming people will be joining in. So, Brian, we're glad to have you, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to the conversation. Yes, my name is Brian Bushway, and I'm part of a team at My Blind Coach, and I'm an orientation and mobility instructor and an echolocator. And I think some of why I was invited in the conversation today was just to talk about my experiences of learning echolocation and becoming visually impaired at the age of 14, and how that whole process as we've all gone through of like learning how to use our other senses in more powerful ways. So it's been an interesting journey, part of the visually impaired community, but been through the education programs and traveled all around the world and just learned a lot. I live here in Los Angeles, California, and it's like hot today, so everyone's hot inside.
Yeah, we understand here in Little Rock. So, Brian, we're really glad to have you. As most of you guys know, if you know anything about blindness, there's a wide variety of different techniques you can use to get around, whether it's cane, dog, echolocation, human guide. There's so much technology now you can use just on an iPhone, all the apps. But to me, what's fascinating, I have an understanding of echolocation, but some of you may not. Let's start there, Brian. Kind of give them a rundown on what echolocation is, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, echolocation is a term that explains that sound reflects off of objects, and the human brain can tell where and learn to discriminate what things are. And it's interesting. So it's just hearing. And it turns out that everybody's already using echolocation. We're just not that aware of it. And, as it sort of breaks down, there's passive echolocation and active echolocation. And pretty much every human being is using passive echolocation, different levels of awareness and strategy. And that's just passive echolocation is any of the ambient noises in the environment, cars passing by, air conditioner fans, people even talking in the other room. Those sounds travel and gives tiny reflections off of objects around people. And that's how we can tell, where things are. And then
Hey everyone,
Brian,
I think
we
we're having
lost you.
Yeah, I think we're having a few technical difficulties.
And that's what's cool. I mean, we're all kind of doing it already. We all know the difference if someone's like talking on the phone and they're in a bathroom versus something else, right? A bigger room. Well, that's all passive sound that's reflecting. So the world has this cool aesthetic of sound. And it turns out that we, and every human being, can learn how to use these layers of sound in more powerful ways to travel, to gather more information and do what we want.
So, Brian, when you lost your vision, how did you discover echolocation?
Yeah, so about the end of 7th grade, I went about 6 months from the end of 7th grade to the beginning of 8th grade. I went from functional vision to now having no light perception. And I was out of school and eventually got, cane training. Orientation mobility instructor came to the house, showed me human guide. Here's how you use a cane, 2-point touch. And
Had you known what cane? Had you seen a cane before? Had you been around any other blind people before that point?
No, nothing. I mean, I think maybe in like the third grade, a person came and like showed us Braille. And so I kind of knew about that. But as far as, functioning as a person, even low vision, that I had no idea. And I was really at a loss. Like I was stuck. I was really stuck in my bedroom. I thought I'd be living the rest of my life.
So at that point, then the orientation mobility instructor, how did you get in touch with them?
It was through the school district. We went to the Braille Institute in the youth program there, and they sat my mom and myself down and says, "Hey, here's all your rights. Here's what your school district can provide for you." And one of those services was orientation and mobility. And when I was out of school, I was lucky enough that they acted quickly, and I had an O&M come to the house. And they brought a lot of like educational books for my mom to read, and they showed us Human Guide, and here's a cane, and there's, wow, there's ways to do this. And that was sort of the.
So was your house, were you in like were you in the city, or was it more of the suburb, rural part of the town?
It was in the suburbs. It was in the suburbs.
So did you
like
guys have sidewalks and all that?
Yeah, track housing, modeled homes. Every fourth house was the same home, and then 4 houses down. So pretty, nice, pretty uniform, pretty quiet residential streets.
So you had a good place to kind of try out echolocation for sure.
Well, I didn't even know about it, right? So there I am in the 8th grade cruising with my cane, and I can tell that there's a pillar, open space. And I was like, I thought I was seeing them, but I'm told I have no light perception. I'd close my eyes. I was still able to walk around this. And the other teachers and, Braille teachers said, "Oh yeah, we know you lose one sense, the other senses get stronger." I mean, some just said, "Oh yeah, different people, they have in report like these abilities to sort of tell and know what things are," or like people experience that they can feel pressure as they get closer to objects. And they didn't really have an answer, but sure enough, I had discovered passive echolocation, and nobody really understood it or had any more thoughts about it. And then I ended up meeting a mentor who is visually impaired himself, and I shared this experience. He says, "Brian, what you're using is echolocation. Why don't you try an active click? Use a tongue. Use your mouth, use a tongue click." He's like, "That's going to bring you more detail, and the sound is reflecting off of objects." And there it was. Because I was hearing the open space as I was walking down. I was passively then building line, threshold of the external edge, and then open space. Wow, was hearing that passively. But now I had this additional strategy of using my hearing. It just made walking into unfamiliar areas and room familiarization so much quicker, because I had this as a teenager full that I had discovered it, and then I had some mentorship to show me, and then like teachers, then to strategize, how to help me develop this skill. And it's really just using my sense of hearing in more strategic ways.
So at that point, you said you're about 8th grade, so 13, 14 years old. How did you, I mean, obviously you were interested in this and it was working for you. How did you hone that?
I practiced a lot on my own.
So you were going out in your own neighborhood, walking around. Did you have an orientation mobility specialist who supported you in echolocation at any point? We keep losing you, Brian.
For like an hour Sunday. But when I would get home from school, I would challenge myself. Okay, today I'm going to walk to the end of the driveway and then go back to the door. And then the next day I would go out, and then maybe I'd get to the end of the driveway, and then I would just stand there and listen. I mean, I remember the first time I had to figure out how to cross the street. It was a cacophony of noise. It made no sense at all. But then with time, the brain rewires itself and it organizes the information. And then, aha, you can actually hear the near side parallel traffic surge. And you're okay, flag the cane, time, just 1, 2, off with the shoe. And there we go, crossing the street. But echolocation was super helpful in not veering, because if you can hear a hollow sound from across the street or a deep curb corner, have a target to aim at. So it helps with veer correction, gives you something to aim at. And but I turned practice into play, and just I realized, because I had some contrast, right? I saw like in the youth program, I was 15, 16, and I saw a lot of people who were like born blind. And then here I was like a couple months, and I was more mobile than people who had training for longer years. And then I saw other guys who were visually impaired, and they were more free, moving around, talking to girls, going to parties, getting into trouble. And I was like, well, what do they have that these other people don't? And the equalizer was, they had better like O&M skills. And so early on, I just thought it was a priority. And my first O&M instructor, she says, Brian, this is the most important class you ever will have. If you can't find the classroom, then why are you worrying about accessing the information on the inside? And so I had a lot of like support from the, like, I guess, the VI team that said, encourage, more movement. And also in school, like once I had learned my route from one classroom to the other, I wondered, hey, can I go around the building the other way and still get there? So I was curious to then go try other ways. And sometimes it was more successful. Like I only got good because those were as many times as I got lost. I only refined my cane skills because I wasn't using it and fell off things and crashed into things. It's like, oh yeah, 2-point touch is pretty brilliant.
So with your echolocation now, and I'm assuming over time, it's really, you've developed it, you've honed it. How often do you use a cane now, or is that a tool you use in addition to?
Oh, I mean, I always use a cane. Always. I've never not like use a cane. Like in a familiar area like my house, you don't really need it. But it's not a replacement, right? It's an auditory skill, right? So really what I developed was strong auditory and navigation skills. And there's like parts of the brain, right? There's like echolocation works because it activates the object recognition parts of the brain. But then there's navigation parts of the brain. And this was the difference. Like a lot of the guys, kids who were born blind, they had great hearing, but they didn't have as much opportunity to move and to walk. And that's where sensory integration happens, through movement. And so the people who move more, brain to do this, you have to like gather experiences.
Hey Brian, you're breaking up a little bit. It's kind of on and off. Just a heads up.
Okay.
So I got kind of talking. So I did get the tail end. I think we got the tail end of that. For orientation and mobility instructors who've never worked with someone who's interested in echolocation, what's a bit of advice you could provide to them?
I mean, to realize that the student is already using it, right? They're already passively using it. And so the next level is the active, using an active source. But it's really about introducing, wow, different places sound different. And just in developing comparisons, are you in a, like, a small hallway or a bigger hallway. You know, those environmental sounds are all because of echoes. And so they're already doing it. And it's really just about supporting and being curious of sound is the easiest way, and realizing that it's there. Like, one of the biggest things is walk into a space and clap your hands. And if you can hear a big echo, oh, that's the most powerful information, because now you know there's a building there. You know, like a lot of fun exercises with young kids is you run out into the big school open field and you get all disoriented, spin around. And then if you clap your hands, you usually can hear the echo off the big school building. And then you can walk towards it, and you have a direction where to head.
So for people who are interested in learning echolocation, what is these kind of run together. What's a tip you would give them if they're curious about getting started?
Yeah, I mean, the curious part is start comparing. Like, the first X step exercise is like,
Brian, you broke it up again. So if you can hear me.
is going to pick everything up close, and hearing best used at picking up information out in the distance. So it's really not this or that. It's a brilliant teaming of both senses. Hearing gives you preview of your environment, and your cane is navigating the smaller movements and obstacles up close. And you're sort of switching the brain between both.
So again, so moving into what I'm really excited about talking to you about is the athletic side of this. So when you lost your vision after your vision loss, at what point did you start trying to be athletic, assuming you were already somewhat athletic with your vision?
Well, like right away, when I first lost my vision, I sort of wanted to do a lot of the activities I did before. So within the first like couple years, I had a cane and I built a grinding rail on my driveway, and I'd use my cane to track along the rail and then jump up there on rollerblades, and then grind down to the street. So I was active pretty quickly. Then I ended up getting together with a team where we got off the tandem bike and started frame, angled it into the wheel spokes, and as the wheel goes around, it makes a grrr sound. So that gives a good sound clue to where to follow. And then with active echolocation, you can hear if you're closer to the right side or the left side, and then navigate and be a pilot of your own bike.
So talk about that, because that's exciting. When did you hop on a bike by yourself with practically no vision?
Yeah, I mean, no light perception for sure. But then if you can see with sound, it sort of messes with a lot of the words. But I was probably like a sophomore who were like out moving, who were already active echolocators. Like, this was nothing I discovered on my own. This was other people who were doing this. And I was like, I want to learn this too. And that was what was brilliant, that people can learn this. And I only became, skilled at it because, I was around people. So they went out on a ride without me. And I heard about it and says, well, why didn't you invite me? And they says, well, you've only been blind like a couple years, and we just didn't know if you were ever ready. And I says, well, I can ride a bike. Let me try. And so then the next ride I was invited, and then we started figuring out a system, just sort of, following. You start in like very controlled environments. And then as everyone's skills increase, you start doing more and more.
So what's a regular bike ride for you now? What does that look like?
Oh, I haven't been like on a bike in a long time. Right? It's logistic, sometimes difficult.
Yeah.
So, it's like recreational, but I spend most of my time walking neighborhoods and, teaching and instructing mobility. But it's one of those things. Hey, you want to go on a ride? You can jump on it. There's a system and go. It's more that, I got to get my cardiovascular system up.
Oh, sure.
And that's a whole, like, just general physical fitness impacts, our ability to even just walk around and perceive our environments, So they be.
Sorry, guys, we're having technical issues. Brian, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So talking about from your experience as an athlete, moving into more sighted people who are athletes, how do you see, how has echolocation impacted sighted athletes, and what are they using now?
Yeah, well, echolocation like piques their interest about what are the possibilities of sound, which then opened up this whole discussion of how is sound being currently utilized in sports, and what does, if we want to call it, blindfold training, what does it enhance for the other senses? Because vision is a loud sense. It bombards 2/3 of the brain. And when you quiet that sense, it creates so much more real estate for the other senses and the subtleties of them to become noticed. So in sports, baseball players like Mookie Betts on the Dodgers, he practices with his back turned to hear the information that comes off the ball of the bat. He knows where it's going, how far to run, where to place himself. And he judged all of that by sound. Tennis, they realize that while all the tennis players are making that grunting sound, part of it is they're creating a masking sound so that the other player cannot hear the ball come off the tennis racket, because sound is connected to muscle motor movement. It's really quick. So spatial understanding with sound is actually quicker for the brain to process. So then Tyson Fury, the world heavyweight boxing champ, he practices 60% under blindfold, 60%, because he feels that training informs his other senses so much that, wow, our other senses are really providing a lot of human performance and play. And vision, yes, has its, role, but it's, our whole ability to move in life is being informed by all of these senses. So it's, athletes have just gotten curious of like, how can they use sound and like even the sense of feel? How do they use all of their other senses to become more informed to get that extra edge in their play?
Yeah. Well, cool, Brian. Guys, again, this is Brian Bushway with My Blind Coach, myblindcoach.com. You guys can check him out. We're going to open it up for questions. Sharon has shared in the chat. If you guys want to check out any of our programs and services here at World Services, it's WSBLIND, WSblind.org. And if you have any questions you would like us to pass on to Brian and his team, send that to training@WSblind.org. So folks in the chat, if you have questions for Brian, you can send those to the chat, or you can open your mic and ask questions to him. So again, thank you guys for joining. We really appreciate it. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, you're welcome.